Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. I'm your host, Teri Barr. If you've been watching the housing market in any time in the last year or 2 years, you've probably seen some pretty drastic price increases. We're going to learn what it looks like for this year when we talk with Natalie Campisi. Now, Natalie is the Mortgage and Housing Analyst with Forbes Advisor. And Natalie, happy to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much, Terry. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, okay. These prices have just gone through the roof. And I don't know if that was a funny saying or not, but tell us more. What are you seeing as far as housing prices as we look at 2022?
So 2022 has proven to be sort of a continuation of what we saw last year. Home prices are still rising. Usually winter is sort of the slow time. Prices tend to cool a little bit, but we are not seeing that. We're seeing home prices rise, and a lot of that is due to the historically low inventory. There's just not enough houses on the market to meet demand. So sort of the basic law of supply and demand, when demand is high and supply is low, prices just shoot up. And that's exactly what we're seeing.
This isn't going to end anytime soon, it feels. Let me ask you about new homes. If people can't buy existing homes, are there new homes being built, or is this a problem too?
This is also a problem. Excuse me. Sorry about that. New home construction is also lagging. So this is due to a variety of reasons. It's sort of the perfect storm of horrible. We're seeing, a shortage of labor. So since 2008, the housing crisis, the amount of talent and labor and craftspeople has sort of waned, and that number hasn't picked up. So there's a shortage there. There's so much demand for new home construction that companies are just not able to keep up with demand. Of course, there's the shortage of lumber and
Right.
supplies. Inflation is playing a huge part in this. So the cost of supplies is rising. So it's sort of this, a terrible mix of problems. And basically, new home builders can't keep up. Um,
Wow.
so what we're seeing is, and also add to that, the fact that Americans are aging in place. So you're not seeing like baby boomers and people that are retirement age downsizing or selling their homes. They're staying in their homes. So that supply is sort of constrained too. Um, and some experts speculate that we're not going to catch up for another 10 years.
10
Um,
years.
some say that it could take up to 10 years to catch up with the supply. It's this year was the lowest we've had on record. So it's pretty bad out there.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds kind of doom and gloom. And I know we don't like to do that, but we
Right.
want to be realistic and let our listeners know what to expect. Do you have any idea right now what maybe the median house price is? I can only imagine.
So right now I'm not exactly sure. I don't have the number in front of me. Let me see. I want to
Okay.
say I know it's over 300,000.
Yeah.
I'd have to look, but it's risen in some places 19% year over year. So it's really jumped quite a bit. Of course, real estate is local. So coastal areas, California, and certain other areas where some of these people from the West Coast and the East Coast are moving to have really jumped. So like Phoenix, Arizona, and Boise, Idaho, places like that, Austin, Texas. I mean, home prices have just skyrocketed. You're seeing places like Houston also rise quite a bit, and this is due to the work from home freedom that we've gotten since the pandemic. So people are able to bring their big, kind of San Francisco paychecks or their big Los Angeles and New York paychecks to more affordable areas, but then they end up pricing out the locals.
Right.
So those folks have to move farther. So that's kind of what we've been seeing, that people who really do want to buy a home, and they can't afford to buy where they live, they are moving. I mean, it might seem extreme, but those are some of the measures that people are having to take if they want to get a home.
What about renters? I know we've seen rental prices go up as well, another through the roof, I'll say. But are they able to get out of renting to buy a home, or do they kind of need to stay put at this point too?
So it's sort of a catch-22 for renters right now.
Mm,
They're, they went from sort of low rent prices during the start of the pandemic
yeah.
and getting these great deals to a complete about face. Last year, rent prices went up 30% nationwide, which is
30.
astronomical. Yeah.
Wow.
30%. Yep. Usually, to put that into perspective, rent prices don't rise more than 2.5 to 3% year over year. So
Okay.
30% is, an enormous jump. And this is really putting the squeeze on people who want to save for a home. We're hearing some really terrible stories of people who work full-time jobs, they can't afford rent, and they're living in their cars. Um, you know, we just wrote a report about rent prices across the country, and of course, New York City, not surprisingly, took first place as far as rent prices jumping. But then affordable areas like Tampa, Florida, and St. Petersburg, Florida,
Mhm.
were the second and third spots, rent prices jumping, which was
Wow.
kind of a surprise because these are areas that are known for affordable housing, low taxes, that sort of thing. Um, so I think it shows that it's a squeeze on housing across
Yep.
the board. Mm.
Have you seen anything like this in the time that you've been doing this, or is this just a very strange period of time?
It's such a strange period of time because I bought my house during the housing crisis. So back in 2007,
Mm,
and that was a completely different animal. You had terrible lending practices
yep.
coupled with oversupply. So we had an abundance of housing, and now we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing really solid loans. I mean, people have high credit scores. These are solid mortgages, and we have just a lack of supply. So it's just a completely different beast, and I think it's new to most people in the industry.
Yeah, and kind of shocking, I'm sure. So what do
Mhm.
we do, Natalie? What do we leave with our listeners? What should they be thinking about when I'm sure there are many people that will listen to this that want to get their hands on a house?
So the first thing I would say is don't be completely discouraged. I mean, this is a really difficult housing market, and I've spoken to real estate brokers and lenders across the country, and they tell me the same stories, that they have clients that have been in the market for 8 months, a year, and it's difficult. It's daunting. Some people decide, we're going to max out our budget. We might even tap our 401k. We're just going to buy a house. We just want a house. Some of this is due to FOMO, fear of missing out. They feel
Yeah.
like I have to buy now. A lot of people, and this is pretty interesting, are really concerned about their school district because of COVID protocols.
Mm,
So different school districts have different COVID protocols. And so there are a lot of families that really want to get a house in certain districts. So that puts a lot of pressure on them. For people who are just, they don't have enough of a down payment, because as home prices rise, the down payment rises too. So that's really tough. You could have saved up, a 5% down payment, and then home prices rise so much that now your 5% down payment is 3%. So
right,
it
right.
can feel like you're on this never ending treadmill. My advice is, look a little farther out. Don't look just this year or next year. Maybe have a 3-year plan, a 4-year plan, or even a 5-year plan. Keep in mind that people who are buying houses are sometimes making enormous sacrifices. they're moving across the country, they're tapping savings, they're borrowing from family members. So you may have to get creative. You may have to really consider where you want to live. Those big decisions. And I would say, don't get so stuck on what's happening today. Think, okay, I can't afford it right now, but the market will change. It always does. We don't know what's going to happen in a couple of years. Prices could fall dramatically. They could go up, of course, but
Mhm.
if you have a plan and maybe look at some places that are more affordable, that sort of thing, I think you'll be in a good position, rather than just sort of like ruminating on what's happening right now, which, it's almost out of our hands. We also are competing with investors, which make up like 23% of the buyers,
Oh,
and they
wow.
have cash, and so they can, outbid anyone and kind of snap up these homes right from under, first time buyers and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I like the idea of a plan. That always feels a little secure too, like you have put something down on paper and you're working on it. Is there anything particular that people could put into their plan? I know you mentioned, looking at places to move. Should they be working on their down payment? What should they be doing during the next 3 or 5 years?
They should consider places that they'd like to live. So, if you're living in San Francisco or you're living in New York or Los Angeles, you're looking at, a 3 bedroom home that, might cost $700,000 or $800,000. So you have to make quite a bit of money to buy those sort of homes. So that might not be practical. You might have to look outside of those areas. And I would say come up with a list of places you could live, especially if
Yeah.
you can work from home. You might be in your career building years where you have to live in a San Francisco or an LA or a New York or something like that.
Mhm.
And that's great, build your career up, maybe sort of think about jobs that have higher salaries or positions or things like that, work with a career coach. And you may not need to live in those expensive markets down the road. So I would come up with your wish list of more affordable areas. That might be one step. And then number two, of course, get that down payment ready,
Yeah.
explore down payment assistance program. There are so many, and that can be really helpful. There are some down payment assistance programs that don't require you to pay any of the money back. They help with closing costs, so that could be really great. And find a lender that can help you navigate the process. So once you get closer, even if you're a year out, start looking for a lender, and they might look at your credit score. They might look at how much money you have and say, okay, you know, this is what you need to do with your credit
Mhm.
score to get the lowest interest rate, which is also going to cut down on your mortgage payments
Right.
and expand how much you can afford. They might also say, you know what, you need a little bit more money in savings. Your debt to income ratio is a little high. So they'll help you. A good lender can help you work on a plan. So I would say when you're about a year out, you have a good amount of savings for down payment, start looking for that lender.
Ugh. Anything we're missing aside of have a plan and
Hmm.
chill a little bit, I guess, on
Yep,
this whole thing. Yeah.
yep.
Oh my gosh.
I would also say, and this is not available for everybody, I understand, and it could be, a huge sacrifice, but with rents rising so much, if
Oh,
you really are serious about buying a home, if you can get a roommate, or if you can even move
mhm.
in with a family member or something to offset these high rent costs, um, that could be a good move. It is a big sacrifice, but if you look down the road, and it means that you can access home ownership sooner, it might be worth exploring. So
Yes.
I would say, it's rent is really high right now, and it's no joke, and it can really set you back as far as savings.
It sounds like almost anything is on the table these
Yes.
days. Just
Yeah.
be creative
Yep.
and use some of the tips that Natalie just gave us here. Natalie, thank you so, so much. It's been a really interesting ride with this housing market and the pandemic, of course. So we're going to keep an eye on things for sure.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Terry. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. Natalie Campisi. Natalie is the mortgage and housing analyst with Forbes Advisor. And of course, you are listening to the PennyWise podcast. I'm your host, Teri Barr from Lee Enterprises. Thanks for joining us today.